There is a particular kind of tragedy that follows not the man who never had a chance, but the man who had every chance and squandered it with his own hands. Dababy, born Jonathan Lindell Kirk, is that man. At his peak, he was untouchable. Chart-topping records, sold-out shows, a magnetic stage presence that few artists in any generation could match. He was the kind of rapper who made everything look effortless, whose rise felt inevitable, whose future seemed limitless. And then, in the span of one summer, he lit it all on fire. The story of Dababy's fall is not a simple one. It is not just a story about a controversial comment at a music festival, though that moment sits at the center of everything. It is a story about ego, about the refusal to read the room, about what happens when a man confuses invincibility with immunity. It is a story about the music industry's shifting values, about the power of public opinion in the social media age, and about what it truly costs to be one of the biggest names in the world, and then lose it all. This is the full story. From the streets of Charlotte to the top of the Billboard charts, and from the Rolling Loud stage in Miami to the bargain bin of irrelevance. Jonathan Lindell Kirk was born in Cleveland, Ohio, before his family relocated to Charlotte, North Carolina, a city he would go on to represent fiercely in his music and his identity. Charlotte was not a traditional rap hub. It didn't have the mythological street credibility of Compton or the cultural dominance of Atlanta. But Dababy didn't need a city with a reputation. He was building his own. He began his rap career around 2015, initially performing under the name Baby Jesus, a bold, borderline blasphemous tag that suited his outsized confidence, before rebranding to Dababy, a name that was less inflammatory but no less attention-grabbing. The rebranding was smart. Baby Jesus was a gimmick. Dababy was a brand. His early years were defined by grinding. Mixtape after mixtape, regional buzz built slowly through sheer volume and relentless hustle. He wasn't the most technically gifted rapper in the game. He wasn't reinventing the wheel lyrically. But what he had was something that can't be taught and can't be manufactured, a presence. On a track, Dababy sounded like a man who genuinely did not care what you thought of him, and paradoxically, that made you care about him deeply. His breakthrough came with the 2019 single Suge, which peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100. The song and its hilarious video perfectly encapsulated his appeal, a tough guy persona delivered with a smirk and an undeniable charisma. Suge wasn't just a hit. It was a statement. It said, "I'm here, I'm different, and I'm not going anywhere." From there, the ascent was dizzying. Grammy nominations followed, major festival bookings followed, features with the biggest names in music followed. By 2020, Dababy was everywhere, and not in the oversaturated, watered-down way that kills artists. He was omnipresent in the best possible sense. Every song he touched turned to gold, every appearance generated buzz, every project landed with impact. Then came ROCKSTAR. The song featuring Roddy Ricch arrived in the summer of 2020 and detonated. It hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there. It became the anthem of a strange, locked-down, socially fractured summer. It was played at protests. It was played at parties. It was played everywhere. With ROCKSTAR, Dababy didn't just have a hit, he had a cultural moment, the kind that defines a career and cements a legacy. At that point in the summer of 2020, Dababy was arguably the most commercially dominant rapper alive. The future looked infinite. But even before the defining scandal of 2021, there were signs that Dababy's relationship with consequence was complicated. Long before fame, Dababy made headlines for all the wrong reasons. In 2018, a viral video showed him shooting a man inside a North Carolina Walmart during a fight while holding his young daughter. He claimed self-defense and charges were dropped, but the footage haunted his early career, with critics questioning his judgment. The Walmart shooting revealed something important about Dababy that the industry largely chose to overlook in the glow of his commercial success. He was a man who moved through the world as though rules, consequences, and social contracts simply did not apply to him. That energy translated brilliantly on record. On a rap track, fearlessness is a virtue. In the real world, it's a liability. When Megan Thee Stallion revealed she had been shot by Tory Lanez, Dababy mocked her trauma in a since-deleted Instagram post, captioning a photo of himself with a tone-deaf quip that sparked fury from fans and fellow artists. The incident painted him as deeply insensitive during a movement advocating for black women's safety. Each of these incidents was a warning, a flashing red light on the dashboard that said, "This man does not know where the line is or does not care." The industry looked the other way because the numbers were too good. When you're selling that many records, people find ways to explain away your behavior, but warnings ignored don't disappear, they accumulate. The pivotal moment came on July 25, 2021. During his performance at Rolling Loud in Miami. What should have been a victory lap, a headlining set at one of the biggest hip-hop festivals in the world, turned into a catastrophe when Dababy launched into an unexpected monologue targeting LGBTQ+ communities and making dangerous, wildly inaccurate remarks about HIV/AIDS. He said things like, "If you didn't show up today with HIV, then wave your cell phone in the air."
So you don't even regret saying this shit? Say what?
You didn't show up today with HIV, AIDS, any of them deadly sexual transmitted diseases that'll make you die 2-3 weeks. Put a cell phone like that.
Niggas still saying shit like that
Alongside
now.
other comments,
But they not
only
baby.
offensive,
Get up and go get some.
Irresponsible and genuinely harmful. The crowd, caught up in the electric atmosphere of a live performance, gave some initial response. But the moment the clip hit social media, which took approximately no time at all, the reaction was explosive. What Dababy had said wasn't just offensive in the way that edgy humor sometimes crosses a line. It was factually wrong in ways that caused real harm to public health education. It stigmatized an entire community. It was delivered with a swagger that suggested he found it funny. The internet did not find it funny. The backlash was instant. Festivals dropped him, brands distanced themselves, and even Dua Lipa, one of the biggest pop stars in the world, removed his verse from her smash hit, Levitating remix. That last move was particularly symbolic. Levitating, featuring Dababy, had been one of the biggest crossover moments of his career. Proof that his appeal extended beyond hip-hop into mainstream pop territory. Having that feature stripped away was a public declaration that his toxicity had a cost even his commercial value couldn't offset. Deals with Boohoo Man, Lollapalooza, and Burger King ended. Radio stations removed his songs from airplay. The walls were closing in from every direction simultaneously. At this point, Dababy had options. He could have come out immediately, genuinely, and humbly. He could have listened, educated himself, and shown the kind of growth that the public, despite the cynics, is actually capable of rewarding. People have come back from worse. He did not do that. Initially unrepentant, Dababy took to Instagram, where he claimed he was tired of being labeled homophobic and implied that jealousy over his success was fueling the criticism against him.
Regardless of what you talking about, how the internet and twisted up my words, me and all my fans at the show, the gay ones and the straight ones,
This was a catastrophic misreading of the situation. The criticism wasn't coming from jealous rivals. It was coming from fans, advocacy groups, fellow artists, public health professionals, and major corporate partners who had money on the line. Framing it as a conspiracy of haters was not just wrong. It was the kind of response that transforms a controversy into a full-blown crisis. Within days, and perhaps realizing the gravity of public opinion, he released a more measured apology video, acknowledging that his comments had hurt people, but the apology still seemed somewhat defensive regarding their impact.
I do sincerely apologize, I do. I'm very sorry that there was a female on the other end of that flashlight on that phone. But keep in mind, I couldn't see you because you got the flash this close to me, which is okay, it's no problem. A lot of people did. They didn't put it as close as you put it, but a lot of people had flash on me, and that's okay, that's what I signed up for. That's the risk I take when coming up.
Half-hearted apologies in the social media age have a very short shelf life. The public has developed a finely tuned radar for performative accountability, and Dababy's apology pinged it loudly. Then, as if determined to prove that the controversy hadn't taught him anything, he continued to behave in ways that kept feeding the news cycle. He posted multiple videos on Instagram kicking the mother of his child out of their house and yelling insults at her.
That's what it is. Like no. Go with your move, crazy girl. You started.
God, please, I pray that this is the last situation. This is the last time, because
a pattern of behavior that reinforced a growing narrative about who he was as a person, beyond any single incident. The music industry was watching all of this and quietly updating its calculations. The most brutal verdict in the music business isn't a bad review or a Twitter pylon. It's bad numbers, and Dababy's numbers began telling a devastating story. By September 2021, streaming numbers showed a sharp decline. Spotify streams dropped by over 30%, radio play dwindled significantly, and collaborations with prominent artists became scarce, a stark contrast to the previous year when he was one of the most featured artists in hip-hop. His album *Baby on Baby 2 got little attention compared to previous projects, with about 17,000 units sold in its first week, an 86% drop from the first-week sales of his previous albums. For context, his earlier work had debuted in the hundreds of thousands. Watching those numbers collapse in real time was jarring. This wasn't a slight dip, this was a cliff edge. He was mocked on social media for offering a 2-for-1 ticket deal to a show in Birmingham, Alabama. A show of his was also reportedly cancelled in New Orleans because of low ticket sales. For a man who had headlined Rolling Loud just months earlier, these were humiliating developments. The optics were brutal. The trajectory was unmistakable. Dababy had gone, in under a year, from the top of the mountain to scrambling for relevance. Faced with this reality, Dababy made one more costly error. He looked outward for someone to blame rather than inward. He implied he was a victim of the LGBTQ community and its power to get rid of celebrities, calling himself Blackballed Baby, and suggesting that the industry had conspired against him. Some fellow artists sympathized. Some rallied around him, framing the situation as an overreach of cancel culture and using his case as evidence that free speech was under assault in the entertainment industry. But critics and analysts saw through the narrative. The argument ignored an important fact. Dababy simply wasn't making compelling music anymore. Quality output supersedes almost any offense in the music industry. History is full of artists who survived enormous controversy by delivering undeniable records. Dababy was not doing that. There was also a deeper problem with the victimhood narrative. It required Dababy to position himself as powerless, which sat awkwardly against his entire brand. His whole identity was built on being untouchable, fearless, dominant. The "I'm being silenced" narrative undermined the very mythology he had spent years building. You can't be the baddest man in the room and the persecuted underdog at the same time. His attempts to drag Megan Thee Stallion into publicity for his album reeked of desperation, which made fans recoil even further. At this point, every move he made seemed to worsen his position. The instincts that had served him brilliantly on the way up were actively working against him on the way down. Eventually, Dababy stopped swinging and started working. He started picking up steam again with Shake Sumn and its sexy red-assisted remix, which generated genuine buzz and reminded people why they had loved him in the first place. He then unveiled his first full body of work in over 2 years, How TF Is This a Mixtape? The comeback was real, if modest. The music was sharper, the energy was more focused. There were flashes of the artist who had dominated 2019 and 2020. Fans who had written him off found themselves nodding along again. But Dababy himself was candid about what the experience had cost him, not just professionally, but personally and creatively. In an interview with The Breakfast Club, he opened up about going from an artist to a politician overnight. In terms of everything else, when it comes to press or how I go about marketing my music, I really got in a space where I was falling out of love with the art of creating music and putting music out because of the politics and everything else that came with it, he explained. That's a telling admission. The controversy didn't just damage his brand, it damaged his relationship with the thing that had made him great. The joy went out of it. The fearlessness that had powered his creativity became tangled up in calculation, damage control, and reputation management. That's a heavy thing to carry into a recording studio. On the subject of being removed from festival lineups, he said that S***T is controlled. Somebody pressed the button. I got to navigate my way through that however I navigate through that. Even in the comeback era, there was still a trace of that old defensiveness, the unwillingness to fully own the chain of events that had led him here. As of 2026, Dababy remains an active artist, but has never fully recovered the superstar status he once held. His story stands as one of the most compelling examples of celebrity and consequence in the 21st century. But what does it actually mean? What are the real lessons buried inside this spectacular unraveling? The first lesson is about timing and context. Dababy's